Welcome to the studio at African Utility Week. I'm Rose Bundock, editor of metering.com, and I'm joined this morning by Jodie Sherwin-Hill, Executive Director of JOMAT Investments based in South Africa. Thank you for joining us, Jodie. I wanted to start by talking about your work with utilities. You work in helping utilities to manage change both within their organisations and with their end users, customers, what you call the human factor. What are the key reasons why that education is so important in any kind of meter rollout, whether it's prepaid or smart meter?
Yeah, so basically what we found is that when you're trying to take a technology into an environment, you actually need to be able to know what that environment is about. So you need to first investigate that environment, and you need to understand the people that live in that environment. Because the problem comes in is when you try and enter with something new and they don't understand what that is, they have no understanding what it is, they tend to reject it and they push back. And then your project timeline gets lengthened, and that costs money because you're paying wages and salaries to people. So what you need to do is you need to now say, well, what are the benefits to the people in that environment of us taking it there? And that's how we get to affect change.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've worked on a number of projects around Africa, East, West and Southern Africa. What learnings have you found in terms of the way utilities are approaching these rollouts and how customers are responding to them?
Yeah, so I think people that are taking technology sometimes aren't thinking about the people factor. You know, they're not always thinking about the people in their organisation or in the environment. And so they might decide that they need to change systems to suit that environment, but even the people inside the organisation don't really understand why we're changing systems and why do we have to go from this 10-year plan of using this to changing to something new. So when we went into Africa, what we realised is that every country that we go into requires a different approach because there's different types of people. The environment's different, the infrastructure's not there. So a lot of the times they want to bring a solution into that environment, but there's no infrastructure. So for example, in Cameroon, the network needs some attention. So when we went there and you want to bring now a smart metering device into Cameroon, you first need to think about the network, because how is that device now going to communicate? So first you need to understand your environment and investigate it. And then you need to know who are all the stakeholders that this is going to involve. And what happens is we think about the government, we think about the regulator, we think about the power supply, you know, that's the grid, like an ESCOM, but we actually forget about the community. And we forget that by the time we get to that point where we want to take this into a community, oh yes, that's right, we haven't educated that community. So we found that we need to make sure that we run a pre-education process to everyone that's involved in that environment. And once we do that, the chances of success are increased dramatically.
So what do you think is holding utilities back from introducing these programs right from the off?
I think that it's holding back because there may be a lack of understanding. Obviously, a lack of investment at times is holding it back, you know.
Is it a costly process to run these kind of
very
programs?
Costly. Yeah, it's the change programs?
Yeah.
Oh, no. So with the change program, our model is T3, what we call T3, which is teach the teacher. So for us to be able to make sure that we can reach the many, because our highest value at JOMAT is to serve as many people as we can, we need to be able to pass our skill set on. So what we do is we first teach you how to do what we're trying to do, which is to affect the change, and then you can use that inside your organisation. You can use it if a CEO is trying to affect a change amongst their directors, who needs to communicate it down to senior managers and in the rest of their staff. You can use it when you're talking to the community, and I'll give you an example of that just now. Once we've now taught you, we watch you teach whoever you need to teach. So we observe you teaching so that we can check in, help you out when you need to. So that's a separate workshop, but it's like a few days. And then what would happen is you then take that model and you apply it, and we provide a support to one person inside your organisation to assist on an ongoing basis via email or Skype, so that you now can go ahead and make sure that you can affect change in whatever environment you need to.
So yeah, can you give us an example?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So
project?
we were doing a project in Soweto, and we were running what we call, lots of people like to call it change management, but change management assumes that I'm going to stay for the whole process. So we like to call it change education, because we're going to educate you on how to implement that change on an ongoing basis in your organization. So we think that's very empowering. And so what we did is we went to speak to, there was 300 people who were taking smart metering into their environment in Soweto. And what we needed to do is we needed to now really sort of inspire the people to want the technology. Because in the past, when they've tried to take a prepaid meter into Soweto, there's been a lot of pushback from the community. So the first step is that we have to understand, as a collective, what are the values of this community? So I want to ask questions, and I want to know, well, what do they spend their time doing? What do they think about? What do they spend money on in this community? So we start asking questions, and we go in and we investigate this situation first. So before we try and affect any change, we want to investigate. And once we investigated, we realized, okay, so let's say 80% of the people inside this environment like going to church on a Sunday. And we say, so that's a high value to them. Why they go to church, it might be for social reasons or whatever, but they all enjoy it. So I know I need to link that back to what I'm trying to do and acknowledge that I'm understanding what's important to them. Then what happened is we classified the change. So we went in now to speak to the people, and they were a bit angry because why must they pay for power? And also we want them to use a smart metering device and use their mobile phone to do it. And so now what we did is we said, let's classify. This is a prepaid device. This is a smart metering device. We want you to just listen to us for half an hour while we talk to you. And this was talking to 150 people at once, sitting in an outside environment, which normally would be quite disruptive. And so they were listening, and we said, we want you to understand. We want to be transparent with you. The next step was, we need to say all the benefits to them of them now using this smart metering device and how it's going to serve them directly. So we stacked those up. We don't stop. 30 or 40 benefits was all we talked about to them. And then obviously we talk about the training that's involved and things like that. And the first question out of 150 people that they asked was, how do I learn how to use my mobile phone to pay for my power? And so the point that I'm trying to make is, if you are considering the people and what's important to them and stacking the benefits directly to them, you will be able to affect the change and take your solution into that market.
Okay. So in Africa, we're sort of talking about educating the community about paying for power.
Yes.
But in North America and Europe, small proportions of the community are pushing back on smart metering through fears of, invasion of privacy or health concerns. What would your approach be
to that market?
Yeah, to that market.
Yeah. So, straight away you've got a feedback mechanism when they're talking about privacy, and you're realizing that that's really important to them. Like, they don't want their data going out to anyone else. So you need to be listening and taking notice of what they're saying. So when you're doing that, you need to then, what I would do in that approach is link how by having a smart meter is going to give you more privacy than without having one. And how they could sign an agreement to say that should this information be used for any other purpose other than this, then they would be able to sue and there would be a kickback. So you need to give them the confidence that you're listening to that need, that they want the privacy, and that you're thinking about it, and you're putting something in place that's going to ensure that they remain, that they have it. Instead of just saying, well, bad luck, we're just going to take this into the market and whatever happens. You need to actually listen. And then what happens is when they realize that you've considered what's important to them, they say, okay, we're comfortable with that now. And so that's how I'd approach that situation.
So what would be the best approach? Would it be, you said you had a meeting in Soweto. What kind of approach would work for other markets?
Yeah, so basically the model that we have is the word change. And what we say is that it doesn't matter if you've got a change happening inside your organization or you want to implement something new in your organization. It can be on a one-on-one basis or a group basis. As long as you're identifying your market and who you're talking to, you apply exactly the same process. So you apply the word change, which the first word is C for classify. H for harmonize, which is the benefits. A for how does this apply to me. N is neutralize, so you need to show them there's pain. Because what happens is when you show someone a benefit, they tend to get very excited and create unrealistic expectations about that change and how it's going to benefit them. So when we say neutralize, we say let's stack some pain. Let's tell them some drawbacks of this solution coming in, so we bring them into a state of balance and they're realistic in their expectation. Then we say G for groundwork, and the last one is E for evaluation. And every single time you can apply that model in any situation.
Because I'm just thinking about in the UK, the energy companies are kind of up against a government campaign, a consumer campaign to sort of drive transparency and to make clearer the process of how consumers are being charged.
Correct.
Would this model apply there?
It would absolutely apply. You see, the problem is that I think there's no transparency because there's a fear if they're transparent that these costs are going to be in front of the consumer, and the consumer is going to say, but why am I paying this much, or why am I paying that much? But what they do is the very thing they fear is they attract. So whatever you fear, you're going to attract. And so what happens is the consumer then wants to find out, and if you're not upfront, then you've lost everything that you tried to do in the first place. So the best thing is to be transparent and once again apply the model and show them how these costs are benefiting them. Why are they paying this money? But we tend to avoid it, and that's when that's when you get trouble, so that's
So is transparency the sort of most fundamentally important thing for a utility to do when it comes to customer engagement?
I believe that if you're not transparent, it's going to come out at some point anyway. It's the law of all lies. Every lie rises to the truth. So basically, if you're not being transparent, at some point it's going to leak these costs that you're charging, and then you're going to have a much bigger problem. I call it either proactive or reactive. That's a reactive scenario, which can be very costly. So proactive is, let's be transparent, let's deal with the pushback early on. At least then when they turn around, we can say, well, we told you that this is the cost we were charging, and you didn't do anything about it, but you were very aware. And then obviously you don't have to deal with these reactive scenarios.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Jodie, thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much.
I'm Rose Bundock from African Utility Week. Stay tuned.